Welcome back to another episode of My BrainWise Coach. I am one of your co-hosts, Bastian, and I'm joined by
Phil Dixon, the other co-host.
And we are so excited to be back with you on another episode on this journey of understanding ourselves from a neuroscience and a little bit of behavioral science sprinkled in. And we have an exciting episode for you. This is the week of Thanksgiving, so happy Thanksgiving to our followers, listeners, BrainWise friends that live in the United States. Those that don't, we also wish you a happy fill-in-the-blank holiday if there's one happening in your country at the time. Otherwise, still have a fabulous week. And for those in the U.S., enjoy your friends, family, all the things you might be doing this week. And really, most importantly, remember we have so much to be grateful for, even when we might not feel that way. So that's number one. Number two, another reason we're so excited for this episode is, drum roll, we have our 5 contest winners that we are going to be giving away one of Phil's books, Understand Your Brain for a Change, and a $10 gift card to go to Starbucks, go to your favorite, whatever it might be. We're going to be sending those out, and we have our 5 winners. So we just want to take a moment and say thank you and acknowledge everyone who submitted a submission to our contest and our giveaway. If your name doesn't get called, that's okay, because we're going to do more of these along our journey. And so there'll be plenty of opportunities for you to engage and have one of Phil's books and a gift card of your choosing in the future. So thank you for being on this journey with us. And thank you for sharing our podcast and liking it, reviewing it, commenting, subscribing, all the things, because it's helping to grow this really amazing BrainWise community. And as of today, we're actually almost at 800 subscribers, which is so exciting and so honoring. Phil and I our definition of success was we wanted one person, Phil.
Absolutely.
but we didn't know. And now we're in 800 plus people that we don't know, but we're getting to know along this journey. So we're so glad that you're with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Phil, is there anything you'd like to say to our contest winners before we announce their names?
Nope, but I do have one addition.
Yeah.
I do know that we've got one person that's not from the US. So maybe a Starbucks gift card might be particularly not useful to them. So we need to think about that.
Definitely. That's a great point, because we do have someone who won the contest that is not, I believe they're in India. That's just based off of what I have seen. But we've got a lot of people across the globe that are tuning in to our podcast. So it's so exciting to see this community that's coming together. Without further ado, we have 5 winners. We said we would announce 5 winners, and we are going to announce them for you today. So take a deep breath, hold on, whatever it is, to see if your name gets called, and we will get started. So the first one is Nikki A. The second is Laura S. And I apologize in advance if I am mispronouncing anyone's names. It's certainly not with intention. Trying to do my absolute best. The third is Akshat A. The fourth is Charlene S. or Charlene S. And the fifth and final is Julian B. So exciting round of applause for our 5 contest winners. We're so thrilled that you're going to be getting one of Phil's books and a gift card sent to you. So you will all be receiving an email if you were one of our selected or our random winners, and we will send you an email and congratulate you, as well as ask for your best mailing address so that we can send out your gift card and book to you. So be on the lookout for that so that we can ensure we get those to you as quickly as possible. Phil, this is exciting stuff. We started this podcast 5 months ago, and look at where we are today.
It's amazing. So thanks, everybody, for coming along with us on the journey. And before people ask, can you send me an audible version of your book? It's in the process of being made, but so far I'm only on chapter 2. So the answer to that question is not yet.
Maybe we'll do a live nighttime bedstory. You can read one chapter at a time to us live, Phil.
Yeah, that'll put everyone to sleep, I'm sure.
Not meant in that way at all, by the way, because the book is fabulous read, but very good. Yes, so exciting. And we're just so grateful that you're all joining us along this journey. So again, congratulations to our 5 contest winners. Thank you for sending in your submission. And thank you, most importantly, for being along this journey with us, because we're so glad that you're here and that you felt empowered and you felt inclined enough to share our podcast with another person or your social circle. Without further ado, we're going to dive into today's topic, which we're just coming off of a 2-part series, Phil, where we were talking about the art and science of effective communication. We talked about the 3 parts of communication: asking great open-ended questions, how do we best communicate or tell our perspective, and then probably most importantly, how do we actively listen to another person. And so it was a great discussion on how we can all improve our ability to be effective communicators with those that we're in conversations with. And one of the things we've mentioned in that series, as well as we've dropped it along the journey, is we've talked about this multiple characters and how there's different characters that we all embody at different times of our life, different times of the day, whatever it might be. And so I thought, as we were talking about what we wanted to go through next, is maybe we have a little bit of a dialogue around what is this multiple characters aspect? Why is it important? And how might someone who's listening in identify their characters? And so for our listeners today, it's going to be a little bit of a shorter episode because it's the week of Thanksgiving here in the United States. This particular episode is probably 20 to 30 minutes, and that will be launched on Monday. And then we'll have our regular Neuroscience Digest episode that comes out on Thursday, but we will get back to regular scheduled programming the week after Thanksgiving. So I think this conversation today around multiple characters is the perfect opportunity to use it to talk about this really interesting aspect of our brains. Phil, why don't you get us started? What does it mean? Why is it important? And how can I use it in my personal life?
Let's start off with some of those occasions when we either are doing a formal assessment, or we're answering a silly quiz, or we're answering something which might be supposedly your character type. And the question's asked, which way do you prefer? Do you prefer the written text or a visual image?
Right.
That's actually a pretty intense question. But sometimes our answers to those are, it depends. And then most of the time, it doesn't give you an opportunity to respond in that way, actually, in the assessment. So you have to pick one or, and so in effect, what you're doing is picking an average self for yourself. Whereas in reality, there's no average. So if you go back to Jung, Jung had what he called the 12 archetypes. And he said, we all tend to have one of these archetypes. And that's probably true in that we can lean in one of those directions. Whether you believe there's 12 or not is a different question. The point is, none of us is exactly that. And one of his students, a guy called Socioli, basically challenged Jung and said, I'm not sure that's true. I think we've got characters inside us. And what we do is we live our lives with a blend of those characters. And he called it psychosynthesis. And I strongly recommend to all of our BrainWise readers that they not read that book. It is one of the most arcane books I've ever come across. But the good news is there was one of Socioli's students who said, yeah, I know this is pretty difficult. Let me translate it for you. And a guy called Piero Fiorucci, I think that's his name, wrote a book called What We May Be. And he explained the fact that we've got these multiple characters inside of us. So that's the sort of background to it. Do I keep going?
Yeah, let's do it.
So when I do my workshops with people and we start talking about how they behave, and we talk about different ways that people show up, particularly on the context that we're in. And what I mean by that is what they're facing, they're stressed, whether it's Monday morning at 9 o'clock, whether it's Friday afternoon when they're exhausted, whether they're at a golf course or anything like that. And when we all behave, we have different characters. So it's fun to identify. I know I've got at least 6 or 7, and I'm happy to share them. But I'm going to give you an example of one that I met many years ago. Many years ago, I was playing golf, and I signed up, I was in Hawaii, for a golf lesson. And the pro showed up, and he was one of the best teachers I've ever had in my life. And the mechanisms he used to teach were superb. He was aligned with the way I think. He was a very gentle character, and we got talking about it, and he said, "What is it you do?" And I explained what I did. He said, "I tell you what, I'll offer you a week of golf lessons if you do me the pleasure of giving me one of your 2-day workshops." So we did an exchange. Fast forward 2 months, his name, I won't give you his full name. His name's David. David showed up at my workshop. It's one-on-one workshop. And we sit down, we have a cup of tea, and within 10 minutes, this guy is beating his fist on the table.
Mhm.
And I was blown away. This was not the character that I had met when I was in Hawaii. And I stopped after listening to him for 3 or 4 minutes when he was beating the table and swearing. I stopped him. I said, "David, I'm confused." I said, because the guy I met in Hawaii doesn't seem to be the guy that's showing up and sitting opposite me now. And
Definitely not the calm and serene one you met.
Not at all. And he stopped dead in his tracks. And he said, "That's what my staff tell me all the time, that there are two sides of me that show up. And the fear that they have is they never know which one is going to show up next."
Wow.
And so we explored that, and I won't give you any more details, but he went back with a conversation with his staff about how he knew we identified 5 different characters in him. There was that real contrast between the 2 main characters, this soft-spoken, gentle giant of a teacher and this horrible giant of a... We finished up on, some people will understand why, he gave that one a name called Dick. We won't go into it any more than that. But that's an example of an extreme example, admittedly, of 2 different types of characters which were confusing his staff.
It's interesting. We have not done that work for me to do personal care or my multiple characters. So maybe we can take a couple minutes and go through a couple for me to identify for people in real time so that they can learn how to maybe do it on their own. I know I've experienced a very similar thing, and you probably have seen it, where I normally am probably one of the most compassionate, empathetic people, not trying to be boastful, but just a part of my innate nature. But then there are times when I get overly frustrated, and you saw it, you actually commented it on the other day, and you're like, "I don't think I've seen this side of Cole before." Where I said I was going to do some things that I normally probably wouldn't say. I would never actually do them, but I was so frustrated, and it was all around my husband was going through running for city council. And anytime you do those kinds of things, all kinds of wonderful people show up and they come out of the woodwork to say things about people. And it was really driving me crazy because I don't like people saying things about my husband. So anyways, I definitely can relate. And I'm sure as our BrainWise friends are listening, they're going, "I have had that same thing," or "I've been given that feedback where one occasion I'm this person, on another occasion I'm this person," or at least in terms of how I'm showing up. So I would be interested to hear, how do we go about identifying that? And why is it important? Like, how is it useful?
First of all, it's useful. And I'm going to give you another example, and then I'll relate to how this lady applied it. And this is some time back now. I was working with a woman who was, I'm going to change her name. Her name was Anna. And that's the changed name. Mm-hmm. Anna was divorced from her husband. They had 2 young boys. I think they were like 5 and 7 when I met them. And her husband had a very wealthy position, but he refused to pay alimony. He refused to pay child support. So she was having to drag him back into court literally every 3 months. And she never got what she wanted. So we started talking about her different characters, and clearly there was a mother character in there. And she described 3 or 4 other things. And then I asked her about her job. And she was a vice president of sales in a mid-sized company. And I asked her how she did, and she said, "Oh, fabulous. The company's growing well. I'm growing well." And I said, "Describe your role as VP of sales." And she said, "Oh, that's different to all of the others. That is what I call my strictly business character. And it's focused, it's on point. Although I'm kind, I never take no for an answer, blah, blah, blah." So I said, "Curious, why don't you take that character into court?" And went, "I never thought of that." Wow. About 3 weeks later, she phoned me up and she said, "I got exactly what I wanted." The first time ever. And she said, I went into the courtroom and my husband would always play on my emotional side, he'd always give in. And so this time I left my emotional character outside the court door and I just said, Bob, this is strictly business. And kept using that phrase. And the judge looked at her and said, I like how you're doing this, and gave her everything she wanted. It's how, not only how we can start to differentiate those characters, but use them in an appropriate context. And I think that's the big point of it is for all of us is, and if we can identify what the strengths of each of our characters are, then we can actually use them much more appropriately.
Absolutely. And so if I actually would like to maybe identify a couple while we're on, but how would someone who's listening to this go, I know that's something that I would like to learn. I'd like to understand my multiple characters because I want to start playing or showing up in spaces differently. How does one go about doing that? What does that look like?
When you're working with somebody else, can often see those different characters. Ask around is one of the things to do, but be willing to accept what you learn. You may not like what you learn. One of the women, when I first learned about this, which is many years ago, there were 6 of us, one of the women turned around and said, I hate one of my characters. And she went on to describe it. She described it as she was I'm not sure I can use this word. We may have to edit it out. She said, I'm a lazy, and that shocked all of us. It was very honest. And she said, it is part of my character. And one of the things that we find is if you ignore part of that character and try and suppress it, it'll leak out in some ways. The words that the characters use tend to be different. You described yourself just now as saying, I'm calm, I'm compassionate, and all of those other words. And then you described the other character that came out that was my words, but feisty, swearing, all those things.
Oh, yes, because I don't use naughty language very often.
I know. I think I've heard you swear one occasion. And it was right then and there. So we tend to use different words. We tend to have a different worldview of life. It's almost like our mental models tend to support one character or another character. And each of these characters you can start looking at, what is it they want out of life? There was one lady I was working with, and this is just a few years ago. She was the eldest sibling. Actually, she was the eldest of 4 daughters. And she said what she grew up with was carrying that around as her role. She had to be the best at everything. She had to be perfect. She had to be the role model. She had to take care of everybody else. And that's how she showed up at work. But she said, there's an equal part of me that wants to just lay back, smoke weed, and do nothing and listen to great music. And I have to suppress that character the whole time. And when she showed up at work, clearly it was the responsible eldest daughter that showed up. So being right and driving for perfection. And she had a couple of those other characters. I said, can you both show up together at work? And she went away this was a 2-day workshop. She went away at the end of the day. She came back in the following morning and she was literally flying. And she said, I realized that when I was younger, I had another character, which I have suppressed, called the fighter, which gets what I want. That gave her the energy to identify that other character, which had been buried for a number of years. So first of all, there's no magic bullet for how to identify these characters. It's an exploration, but most people find it a pretty exciting exploration.
BrainWise friends, that concludes part 1 of My BrainWise Coach, Identifying and Mastering Your Inner Characters. We hope you enjoyed today's episode where we began our discovery of what are our inner characters, how do we begin to identify them, and then we'll be moving into tomorrow, how do we deepen our understanding of this really important exercise. So join us tomorrow morning to continue this dialogue, and again, always stay curious, stay compassionate, and stay brainwise. We'll talk to you tomorrow.